Ready to up your game? Today, we're doing a deep dive into gamification in business. We'll be looking at Gamification in Business by Coppens. So, how do we actually use gamification? What makes it work?
Well, it's funny you should say upping your game, huh? Because most people think it's all about points and badges, right?
Great.
But it's much deeper than that. It's about figuring out what really makes people tick, what makes them want to participate, and then, using those principles strategically.
Yeah, it's not just slapping a leaderboard on something and calling it a day.
Exactly.
Coppens calls it the application of game psychology, game mechanics, and techniques to non-game situations to improve results and engagement. Basically, taking what's so addictive about games and using it to make businesses better, to get people more involved.
Yeah, totally. And it's perfect timing, really. Think about it. We have a whole workforce that's basically grown up with games.
It's true, games are everywhere.
I mean, how many people do you know who are glued to their phones playing something?
All the time.
Right. This generation is, primed for gamification.
They already speak the language. And it's not just for kids anymore, that's for sure.
Right.
And employee engagement, that's a big deal these days. Gallup says only 13% of employees are really engaged at work. That's kind of scary, actually, when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
So gamification, it's like this really compelling solution, potentially.
Absolutely, when it's done well. It's not, you can't just throw it at something. It's like planting a garden,
Yeah.
You need the right soil, you got to tend to it, give it time.
It's a process.
Yeah.
So not a quick fix.
Right.
But the book gives examples of companies using gamification to, get people to actually finish those e-learning courses, the ones.
Oh, yeah.
And then using simulations to get people to change how they act, even project management. Apparently, you can make that fun.
Yeah, more engaging, for sure.
Who knew?
There's some wild stats, too. M2 research found that using gamification, you can get people almost 50% more engaged. Just imagine that.
Wow, that's huge. That's a game changer, literally. Yeah. But, and this is a big but, what about when it goes wrong?
Yeah.
What are the downsides to gamification? Because it can't all be sunshine and roses, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There are definitely things to look out for. It's not a magic solution.
So what are some of the traps people fall into?
Well, one of the biggest ones is they get superficial, just slapping on points and badges without really understanding what will actually get their employees motivated.
Just going through the motions.
Exactly. Style over substance.
Like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much.
Not going to cut it.
And then, you got to be careful with things like leaderboards, because while they can be motivating for some people,
right,
they could really demotivate others. Like if you're constantly seeing yourself at the bottom.
Yeah, that'll kill your enthusiasm pretty quickly.
Exactly.
So it can backfire.
It can, totally.
And then there's this whole pointification thing. What is that?
So pointification, that's when everything becomes about getting those points, even if it doesn't actually lead to the changes you want.
So people are gaming the system.
Exactly. Instead of really engaging with a task, they're just trying to rack up points.
So it's kind of missing the point.
Totally. You're just creating a system where people look for shortcuts and quick wins, It undermines the whole idea.
Right. So we've talked about the potential. We've talked about the pitfalls. Sounds like finding the right balance is key.
100%.
But how do you design a gamified system that actually works, that actually engages people in a real way?
Yeah, finding that balance is the holy grail of gamification.
You got to feel natural, right? Not forced.
Exactly. So where do you even start? How do you actually design a system like that?
Right. How do we make gamification work? What are the secrets?
Well, first things first, you got to know your players, right? Before you think about points or badges or anything, you have to understand your target audience.
Get inside their heads a little.
Yeah. What motivates them? What do they enjoy? What are their existing behaviors? Coppens even talks about asking very specific questions. What kind of games do they already play?
Oh, interesting.
What motivates them at work?
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
It's like what? User research, but for games?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you would be surprised how many companies just skip this step entirely.
They don't do their homework.
No. They're just trying to impose gamification on people instead of designing it with them in mind.
So it's got to be more about intrinsic motivation, right? People have to want to participate, not just feel like they have to.
Exactly. Duolingo is a really good example of how to do this well.
Oh, yeah. Everyone loves Duolingo.
They've found a way to integrate game mechanics into their language learning app, and it just feels natural.
So seamless.
Right. You want to use it. It doesn't feel forced at all.
What are they doing that's so smart?
Well, A lot of things, but one of the best is that streak system they use.
Oh, yeah, I'm obsessed with my streak.
Right. It taps into that thing where we hate to lose something we've been working on.
Hmm.
So we keep coming back every day, doing our lessons, just to keep the streak alive.
So clever, because they've basically gamified consistency, which is like the hardest thing.
Exactly. And it works. Duolingo has been incredibly successful. It proves gamification can really make a difference, you know?
It's not just a gimmick.
Exactly.
Okay, so understanding your audience is key, but what about actually designing the experience itself?
Right.
Like, how do you make it, engaging?
Well, it has to be clear, right? You need clear goals,
Yeah,
measurable outcomes.
got it.
And you really have to focus on the experience you want people to have.
Right.
What do you want them to feel? What do you want them to take away from it? You can't just like throw in some game mechanics and hope for the best.
No, it's got to be more deliberate than that.
Exactly. It's about being strategic, understanding how different elements work together, and you got to keep human behavior in mind, designed for how people actually are.
What do you mean? Can you give me an example?
Yeah, totally. Remember
Mhm.
earlier when we were talking about like giving feedback?
Yeah.
A lot of companies will try to encourage more feedback by rewarding employees for asking for feedback.
Okay.
But think about it. Asking for feedback can be awkward. It can even be kind of confrontational sometimes.
It can feel a little, hey, tell me I'm doing a good job.
Right. It's like fishing for compliments.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on the asking, it's actually more effective to design a system that rewards people for giving good feedback,
Oh, I see.
that encourages a culture of support,
Patrons.
and it feels more natural. It doesn't create that weird dynamic.
So it's all about thinking through those natural behaviors.
Exactly.
And finding ways to design a system that feels right.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. You have to be willing to like adjust things as you go.
So it's not just set it and forget it.
No, no, no. Gamification is an ongoing process.
Mm.
You have to be willing to beta test, get feedback from people, and then make changes as needed.
It's iterative, like any other kind of design.
Exactly.
You start with an idea, test it out, see what happens.
And then refine it.
Exactly.
That's how you make sure it stays relevant and engaging.
It's a living thing.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about knowing your audience, designing for intrinsic motivation, creating an experience that feels good.
Right.
But now I want to see it in action.
Yeah, let's see some examples. Some companies that are like killing it with gamification. What do you have?
Okay, well, one that I always think is super interesting is Recycle Bank. They've figured out how to tap into that desire so many people have, to be more sustainable, to help the environment.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of them. How does it work?
Basically, they reward you for taking those little everyday actions that are good for the planet.
Like what?
Like recycling properly, conserving energy at home, that kind of thing.
So like stuff you should be doing anyway. Exactly. But here's the cool part. They don't stop at just points. They've got this whole social element too. Community challenges. So you can see how what you're doing, like your individual actions, they're part of a bigger picture.
Oh, I like that. So it feels more meaningful, less like you're just in it for the points.
Exactly. It plays on that human need to belong, to be part of something bigger.
Totally. It's like they've gamified, like, saving the planet, making it a team effort. I
Yeah.
love it. It's like finally a way to make being eco-friendly, actually fun and rewarding. Are there other industries where we're seeing this kind of innovation?
Well, since we were already geeking out about Duolingo a little bit earlier,
As you should.
I mean, they really are a great case study for gamified learning. They just get it.
What makes them so effective, do you think?
It's smart because they use a bunch of different game mechanics. We talked about the streaks. They've got points, leaderboards. But it's how they blend those elements
Yeah.
into the learning itself. You're not just chasing points. You're actually learning a language.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a chore.
It feels like, I don't know, almost accidental learning. Like you're having so much fun you don't even realize you're learning.
Right. That's the dream.
It's brilliant. And you know what else is a good example, even though we don't always think of it this way?
What's that?
LinkedIn.
Oh, yeah.
We're all on there, right? But we rarely stop and think about how they use gamification to keep us hooked.
That's true. It's just become part of our lives, hasn't it?
Totally. It's how we work now. How does it work? I mean, what are they doing specifically?
It's really subtle, which is part of why it's so effective. Like that progress bar you see when you're filling out your profile,
Oh, yeah.
totally gamified. And then there's endorsements, skill verification,
Yeah.
all these little things designed to nudge you towards building a better profile engaging with other people.
And don't forget those notifications.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, ding, someone mentioned you in a comment.
Yeah.
Gets you every time.
It's like a little shot of dopamine, right?
Yeah.
They're playing on that desire for validation, for recognition.
It's sneaky. In a good way.
It works.
It really does. So yeah, gamification, it's not just about points and badges like we said.
No.
It's about understanding what motivates us, what makes us tick.
And then tapping into that.
Exactly. And using those insights to create experiences that actually make a difference,
Yeah.
that get us excited, that make us want to participate. It's pretty powerful stuff when you think about it.
It really is. And we're only just scratching the surface.
That's what I was thinking. Like, where does it go from here, right?
As technology keeps evolving, I think we'll see even more creative, impactful uses for gamification in all parts of life. Imagine learning that's so immersive, so engaging, it feels like playing a video game.
Okay, now that's exciting. And with things like VR and AR becoming more mainstream, I mean, it doesn't seem that far off, does it?
Not at all. It's already happening.
That's a wrap for us today, folks. But seriously, I want you to think about this. How else can we use gamification to make work more fun, learning more engaging, to make life, well, just more interesting? It's a question worth asking. So until next time, keep exploring, keep playing.